So, in the first topic, we are going to speak about what we can share in housing projects. There are more English terms of co-housing projects. Researchers and architects use the terms as synonyms, but they are not the same and they are not agreed with definitions of these terms. So, we will give you examples instead of long definitions. Then, you could get the ideas about sharing in housing. The first shared feature in housing is the space. The most common type of this sharing is condominium. Condominium is a building or complex of buildings containing a number of individually owned apartments or houses. There people share only the necessary things like stairs, the elevator or the corridor and storage places. I'm sure you know a lot of examples for it. This picture shows a contemporary skyline building in Paris, where are shops in ground floor and private apartments in the upper levels. The next step is when the inhabitants of the building share not only spaces but activities as well. For it, we use the term co-living, where people usually share their everyday life in one big building. Old Oak Collective in London is a well-known example for this type of building. We can say that it is like a sophisticated dormitory, mostly for young students and digital nomads. In some projects, inhabitants also share the ideas. For example, religion, political view, eco-friendly thinking, or have the same age. For this type of housing, professions usually use the communal housing term. This picture shows UK's first communal housing project for older residents in North London. The next shared characteristic can be the ownership. When people have common spaces, activities, ideas and ownership as well, we can say that it's a communal. These communals are mostly without any rules. In Budapest, there was a small commune called
R33.
33, thank you. The group had a small flat and organized their everyday and more extended life together. It's a little bit a hippie thing, we can say. When people have common spaces, activities, ownership, but no shared idea, it's a co-housing. There are a lot well-functioning examples for the co-housing model. And 30 years old project is in Vienna called Sargfabrik, where the people decided to reuse an old building. They have common spaces and activities, also open to the inhabitants from the neighborhood. Researchers and activists usually use the collaborative housing term for the projects where are common spaces and common ownership, but no activities. The Eastern Housing Project is also located in Vienna, in the Aspen development area. In this new building are separated apartments, co-working place and workshop rooms. These places are mostly rented out, so the inhabitants can reduce their housing costs. The most important thing to have a common ownership. The experts of academic field call the housing where the ownership is shared a cooperative housing project. These developments usually are independent from the housing market, so the tenants don't need to adapt to the changing rental prices. There are more cases from case studies from Berlin for cooperative housing developments. For example, this big yard project in the picture. Collective creation is the last attribute. Collective self-build is really common thing in Western Europe. Then the future residents can decide more things than in a normal housing projects like in a condominium. Collective self-build means that there is no developer, for example in Berlin, where people recognize that a community can save a lot of money of developing costs. From the case studies, it is obvious that these use terms are not perfectly fitted for one housing project because the projects have usually more shared feature in a different level. But it's important to clarify that co-living and co-housing are not the same. There are main differences between the two types of living forms. You can see in the picture that what are the main differences. Co-living is short-term. It is connected to different life stages. Mostly younger residents live there. It is a mixture of working and living spaces. Residents rent their flat, usually from a big company. In contrast with it, co-housing is a long-term living form. The residents are in different age. The open functions are related to the living functions. So residents can rent or own their flats. The most important thing that co-housing building is a result of participatory creation process. So the building is built for the community.